The coffee was a scalding arc through the air, a dark stain spreading across pristine white silk like a declaration of war. Time didn't slow, it shattered. My mind, which had been floating somewhere near the acoustic tiles in a haze of daydreams, crashed back into my body with the sickening, wet thud of ceramic meeting marble. The cup lay in pieces. The coffee, now a taunting brown pool, was seeping into the fabric covering a chest that belonged to the most arresting woman I had ever seen. Luciana Veto. I knew her face from financial briefings and society pages, a grayscale image of impenetrable poise. In person, she was a color photograph in a black and white world. Her hair, dark as a midnight river, was swept back in severe style that should have been masculine, but instead carved out the elegant, brutal architecture of her cheekbones and the cut of her jaw. Her eyes, a shade of brown so deep it verged on black, held no expression at all. She looked down at the ruin of her shirt, then back at me, and I felt my soul trying to crawl out of my body to apologize more effectively. I am so sorry, I didn't see. The words tumbled out, brittle and useless. My face was a furnace. A wall of suited muscle materialized beside her. A hand, large and uncompromising, clamped onto my upper arm. The pressure was instant, meant to intimidate. "You blind, or just stupid," a voice growled near my ear. Panic, sharp and metallic, flooded my mouth. This was more than a firing. This was the kind of mistake that followed you into oblivion. I was about to be erased from the lobby floor. My gaze was stuck on Luciana's face, waiting for the dismissal, the flick of a wrist that would end me. It didn't come. Her eyes never left mine. That blankness in them shifted, not into anger, but into a kind of profound, unnerving assessment. She saw the terror, the humiliation, the pathetic apology in my eyes. Her own gaze dropped to the hand on my arm. "Release her." The command was quiet, absolute. The pressure vanished. My arm throbbed. She stepped closer. The scent of her wasn't perfume. It was cold air, vetiver, and something underneath, a hint of leather and gunmetal. It shouldn't have been intoxicating. It was. She was close enough that I could see the faint pulse at the base of her throat, the only sign she was alive and not carved from marble. "Be careful when you walk," she said, her voice a low contralto that vibrated in my bones. "The world is a dangerous place." Then she was moving past me, her bodyguards falling into step, the ruined shirt a banner of my incompetence. She didn't look back. The procession turned a corner, and she was gone, leaving me standing in a puddle of cold coffee and seismic disquiet. The rest of the day was a blur of whispered gossip and sympathetic, nervous glances. I was the girl who had baptized the Veto air in cheap espresso. My superior, Mr. Henderson, was apoplectic, his face mottled with fear of repercussions. I assured him, voice trembling, that she hadn't seemed angry. He didn't believe me. How could I explain that her lack of anger was more terrifying? Fury was human. What she had shown was disconcerting. But all I could think about was the look. That brief, unguarded moment of assessment. It hadn't been contempt. It had been curiosity. And the ghost of her scent clung to my clothes, to my skin. The infatuation was immediate, a crack in the foundation of my sensible life. I was a woman who balanced spreadsheets and dreamed of coastal vacations. She was a myth walking in tailored trousers. I craved another glimpse, a confirmation that the strange electricity had been real. I got it, hours later, as I left the building under a bruised evening sky. Her car was idling at the curb, a sleek black beast. She was just sliding into the back seat. As if pulled by a wire, her head turned. Our eyes met across the crowded sidewalk. The noise of the city, the honking cabs, the chatter, the rush of wind, muffled into a dull roar. There was no blankness in her gaze now. It was a current, raw and potent, a silent acknowledgement that the collision had been more than physical. It was a shared secret. Her lips, forever in a stern line, parted slightly. For a heartbeat, she was just a woman caught. Then the shutter came down. She ducked into the car and it pulled away, dissolving into traffic. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was real. The obsession took root that night. I dug through every article, every vague reference. Luciana Veto, only child of Antonio Veto, who had transformed a questionable inheritance into a portfolio of gleaming corporations. She was a ghost in the machine, rarely photographed, never interviewed. There were rumors, of course. Whispers of a colder, sharper heir who had consolidated power in ways her father never dared. She was a queen in a kingdom of shadows and boardrooms. And I had spilled coffee on her. The apology was a necessary pretext, a thread I could pull to see if the tapestry was real. Getting her private number required a minor act of corporate espionage, a friendly IT guy with a crush and a loose interpretation of ethics. My fingers were ice as I dialed. The phone rang once, twice. Hello. Not a question. A statement. Hello, madam, it's Olivia. My voice sounded thin, reedy. Olivia? She said my name slowly, tasting it. The silence that followed was a physical weight. I am so sorry for what happened at the office today. I know I already apologized, but I just couldn't get it out of my head. I feel terrible. Please, let me make it up to you. There is nothing for you to make up for. The response was glacial, polished smooth by absolute control. It stalled me. This wasn't a script I'd prepared for. I plunged ahead, the words rushing out. I've made a reservation. At 7th Street Grill. I heard they serve exceptional seafood. Would you care to join me? Another silence. This one felt different, charged. I could almost hear her thinking, see her in some minimalist room, weighing the risk against the pull of that strange current. All right. I'll be there. What time? The control was there, but underneath, the slightest tremor, a fissure. It was everything. 8, I breathed. 8, she repeated. The line went dead. The 7th Street Grill was all dark wood and soft light. I arrived early, nursing a glass of water to wet my desert-dry throat. At precisely 8, the atmosphere in the room changed. It wasn't a sound, it was a pressure shift. Dinah's eyes flickered toward the entrance. She stood there, scanning the room. She had changed the shirt. This one was black, cut close to her form, the top button undone. A simple change that transformed her from a violated executive into something far more potent. She saw me. A faint, almost imperceptible nod to a large man by the door, who melted into the background. She walked to my table, and every step was measured, a study in contained power. Olivia. She settled into the chair opposite me, her movements economical. Ms. Veto. Thank you for coming. Luciana. She corrected me softly, her eyes not leaving my face. You called me into a public place. That was either very brave or very foolish. The statement hung between us. I didn't think you'd come, I admitted. Neither did I. A waiter appeared, and she ordered a scotch, neat, without looking at the menu. I fumbled with mine. So, she said, once we were alone again. You couldn't get it out of your head. Describe it to me. I blinked. The accident? The moment. Your memory of it. It felt like a test. I took a breath, diving into the discomfort. The heat of the coffee on my hands. The sound of the cup breaking, it was so loud. The smell. Your scent. And your eyes. You didn't look angry. You looked interested. A ghost of something crossed her face. Interest is a luxury. One I rarely afford. Her drink arrived. She cradled the glass, the crystal looking fragile in her hand. You work in accounting. Yes. Junior auditor. You find comfort in numbers? Their clarity, I suppose. They're predictable. They follow rules. The world should be so simple. She took a sip, her gaze drifting over the restaurant, a habitual, sweeping surveillance. Why this place? I read you own a stake in the supplier for their shellfish. I thought you might appreciate the quality control. It was a gamble, revealing I'd researched her. Her attention snapped back to me, sharper. You researched my investments to choose a restaurant for an apology dinner. It seemed prudent. A low, quiet sound escaped her. Almost a laugh, but not quite. It was the first crack in the marble, and it was breathtaking. Prudent, she echoed. Tell me, prudent Olivia, what do you see when you look at me? The question was a blade. I could lie, offer flattery. but her eyes demanded the unsettling truth. I see someone who hasn't been touched in a long time. And not just physically. I see a fortress. And I'm curious about what's inside the walls. The air between us crackled. She didn't flinch, but something in her posture softened by a millimeter. Fortresses exist for a reason. The things inside are often best left in the dark. Or, I ventured, my heart and my throat, they're the most valuable things. The most worth protecting. We held each other's gaze over the flickering candle. The dinner passed in a surreal haze. We spoke of neutral things, art, music, the absurdity of corporate culture. She was fiercely intelligent, her observations razor-sharp and dryly witty. She never mentioned her family, her other businesses. The bodyguards I knew were watching from the shadows. We existed in a bubble, and for those 2 hours, Luciana Veto was just a stunning, enigmatic woman who listened when I talked about my love for old jazz records. When the check came, her hand covered it before I could move. This was my interest, she said, the word weighted with new meaning. Outside, her car was waiting. The night was cool. She turned to me, the city lights reflecting in her dark eyes. Thank you for the dinner, Olivia. Thank you for not having me killed over a shirt. That almost laugh again. A temporary reprieve. She hesitated, a conflict playing out behind her eyes. The world I move in, it isn't prudent. It isn't safe. Curiosity here has consequences. I understand, I whispered, though I didn't, not really. She reached out then, slowly, as if fighting gravity. Her fingertips, cool and smooth, brushed a stray strand of hair from my cheek. The contact was a spark that traveled straight to my core. My breath hitched. Be more than careful, she murmured, her voice like dark velvet. Be smart. Then she was gone, the car door closing with a soft, final thud. I stood on the sidewalk, the ghost of her touch burning on my skin. The following week was agony. I saw her nowhere. Heard nothing. The bubble had burst. I threw myself into work, trying to drown the memory of her scent, her voice, that fleeting touch. Then, the call from Henderson. I was being transferred. Effective immediately. My new assignment, Special Projects Liaison, reporting directly to the executive office. To Luciana Veto. It wasn't a promotion, it was an abduction. A beautifully gilded cage. When I was shown into her private office, a vast, cold space with a view that owned the city, she was standing at the window, her back to me. You pulled me from my job, I said, my voice trembling with a mix of outrage and wild hope. She didn't turn. Your department is being audited. There are irregularities. A rival firm is looking for weaknesses. People who are in vulnerable positions can become targets. I process this. You think I'm a target? I think you were noticed. Finally, she turned. Her face was all hard lines again, the woman from the dinner locked away. Here, you are under my protection. And my observation. The work will be nominal. You will have access to this floor. You will not discuss your work with anyone. This is because I spilled coffee on you. This is because you looked at me like I was a person, she corrected, her voice low. And in my world, that is a rare and dangerous thing. It draws attention. Now, that attention is mine to manage. So began a new kind of dance. I had a desk in a quiet anteroom. I brought her files, took her calls, ordered her lunches. She was often gone, for hours or days at a time. When she was in, the atmosphere was charged. We spoke in codes. The report on the Baltic imports, Olivia? She'd ask, and her eyes would say, are you all right? Filed, ma'am. The numbers were clearer than expected. I miss you. It was torture. It was addiction. The first time I saw the other side of her was late one evening. I was working late, unable to leave the silent orbit of her presence. A man entered her office without knocking. He was all sharp edges and menace, a different breed from her polished bodyguards. Their raised voices leaked through the door. Pushing back on the docks, Lucy. They won't listen to reason. Then do not reason with them. Her voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. Make an example. But keep it quiet. The city is watching. And the cop on the payroll? Increase his retainer. And remind him of the photographs. The door opened. The man left, giving me a look that stripped me bare. Luciana appeared in her doorway. She looked exhausted, the weight of her crown visibly heavy. She saw me and, for a moment, the mask was gone. I saw not a mogul or a gangster, but a woman drowning in responsibilities that stained her soul. "You should go home, Olivia. You should eat something," I replied, gesturing to the untouched salad on her desk. She leaned against the doorframe, a startling posture of defeat. "It's not a simple world. The numbers, they don't always follow the rules. I'm starting to understand that." Her gaze was a tangible thing in the dim office light. "Understanding is one thing. Acceptance is another. When you look at me now, what do you see?" I stood, walking toward her until only a foot separated us. The air hummed. "I see the fortress. And I still want to know what's inside." A shuddering breath escaped her. "It's dark in there. I'm not afraid of the dark." It was the permission she needed. Her hand came up, cupping my jaw, her thumb stroking my cheekbone. Her eyes searched mine, looking for fear, for hesitation. They found only a reflection of my own desperate want. When she kissed me, it was not gentle. It was acclaiming, a release of pent-up storms. It tasted of scotch and desperation and a longing so deep it felt ancient. My back met the doorframe, and her body pressed against mine, all lean strength and coiled tension. This was no daydream. This was the dangerous, glorious reality. Her mouth was demanding, her hands in my hair, on my waist, pulling me into the shadows of her world with every searing touch. She broke the kiss, her forehead resting against mine, our breath mingling in ragged sync. "This is a terrible idea," she whispered, her lips brushing mine with each word. "The worst," I agreed, and pulled her back to me. We didn't leave the office that night. In the quiet darkness, on the leather sofa that smelled of her, the fortress walls came down. Her touch, so confident in the boardroom, was hesitant, almost reverent. The scars on her skin, a pale line along her ribs, a nick on her shoulder, were maps of a life I could barely imagine. I traced them with my lips, learning her geography. The cold queen was gone. In her place was a woman of fierce, shocking tenderness, whose whispered confessions were not of empires, but of loneliness, of a childhood spent learning to armor her heart. "I have never let anyone," she started, her voice muffled against my neck. "I know," I whispered back, holding her closer. For a few stolen hours, the world was just us. But the world, as she warned, was a dangerous place. It came knocking at dawn. A sharp rap on the office door. She was awake in an instant, the vulnerable woman vanishing, replaced by the steely commander. She pulled on her clothes, her face hardening into an unreadable mask. "Stay here," she commanded, her voice leaving no room for argument. Through the door, I heard the news. An attack on a warehouse. A message delivered with violence. Her response was quiet, lethal. Double the security on all fronts. And find out who leaked the shipment route. When she returned to me, the dawn light casting her in pale gray, she looked like a stranger. "You need to go home, Olivia. Now. My driver will take you. Luciana." "This," she said, gesturing between us, her eyes full of a pained finality, "was a lapse. A beautiful, catastrophic lapse. You cannot be here. You are a vulnerability I cannot afford, and a light I will not see extinguished. You don't get to make that choice for me. I make every choice that matters," she snapped, the control fracturing. "Do you think this is a game? A romance? People are dead. This is my reality. And if they knew what you are to me," she closed her eyes, mastering herself. "You're fired. Effective immediately. You will receive a generous severance. You will go home, and you will forget you ever knew me." The words were bullets. I dressed with numb fingers, the memory of her touch now a brand of pain. She stood at her window, refusing to look at me. "You're a coward," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "You're not pushing me away to protect me. You're pushing me away because you're terrified of what it means to let someone in." She didn't respond. The fortress walls were rebuilt, higher and thicker than ever. The driver took me home. I was adrift. Fired. Erased. The silence of my apartment was deafening. I expected to feel relief. I felt only a cavernous loss. 2 days later, the silence broke. My phone rang, an unknown number. I answered, hope a stupid, persistent flame. It wasn't her. It was a distorted, malevolent voice. Olivia Tenney. We have a message for your gangster lover. You'll be our delivery system. The line went dead. Then, the door to my apartment burst open. The world dissolved into a blur of violence and suffocating darkness. A coarse bag, reeking of mildew and stale tobacco, was yanked over my head before I could scream. My cry was cut short by a hand clamping over my mouth, large and brutal. I was weightless for a moment, hauled over a shoulder like a sack of grain, the breath driven from my lungs. I heard the shatter of my own coffee table, the thud of my body against the doorframe, and then the cold, antiseptic air of the hallway. Fear was a living thing, coiling in my gut, icy and sharp. But beneath it, a strange, clear thought surfaced. This is her world. This is the danger. It wasn't an abstraction anymore. It was the smell of cheap cologne and sweat, the dig of a shoulder into my ribs, the roar of an engine as I was thrown into the trunk of a car. The ride was a nightmare of disorientation. Every turn, every pothole jolted through me. The fabric of the bag stuck to my lips with each panicked breath. I didn't plead. I knew the voices from the phone, the forced entry, this clinical efficiency. It wasn't meant for me. I was a message. A punctuation mark. My value was solely in who I was to her. Time lost meaning. Eventually, the car stopped. I heard distant, hollow echoes, dripping water, the groan of metal. A warehouse. It had to be. I was pulled out, my legs buckling under me. Hands gripped my arms, dragging me across rough, gritty concrete. The bag was ripped away. I blinked in the low, jaundiced light of a single hanging bulb. The space was vast, a cathedral of decay smelling of rust, salt water, and oil. 3 men stood before me. They weren't thugs from movies. They wore nondescript jackets, their faces etched with a professional emptiness more terrifying than any snarl. One stepped forward, his voice the same distorted calm from the phone. Miss Tenney, you are a welcome guest. Your hostess will be joining us shortly. She's not coming for me, I said, my voice a dry scrape. I aimed for defiance, but it wavered. A slow, humorless smile spread across his face. The Veda woman is many things. Predictable is one of them. She has a code. A weakness. You, it seems, are currently that weakness. He leaned closer. When she arrives, you will beg her to comply with our demands. You will make her see reason. If you are persuasive, you may walk out of here. And if I'm not? The smile vanished. Then you become a lesson in what happens when Luciana Veto fails to protect what is hers. The silence that followed was filled with the dripping water and the thunder of my own heart. I thought of her in her sterile office, pushing me away with words meant to shield. Her fear had been real, prophetic. And now we were both caught in the mechanism of it. I don't know how long we waited. It felt like hours, each second a drop of cold water on my spine. Then, a change in the atmosphere. One of the men by a distant door tilted his head, listening to an earpiece. He gave a sharp nod. She's here. Alone. A different kind of cold seized me. Alone. That wasn't part of the script. The Luciana I knew was a woman of layers, of shields and soldiers. Coming alone was either suicide or a statement of unimaginable power. The main door, a slab of rusted metal, groaned open. A figure was silhouetted against the lesser gloom of the outside night. She stepped inside, and the door clanged shut behind her, the sound final as a tomb seal. Luciana. She wore black, from her tailored jacket to her trousers, blending into the shadows, only her face and hands pale against the darkness. She looked utterly calm. No, not calm. Empty. It was the terrifying blankness from our first meeting amplified. Her gaze swept the room, cataloging the men, the dimensions, the exits. It passed over me, a flicker so fast I might have imagined it, but in that nanosecond I saw not fear, but a calculation so intense it burned. Mateo, she said, her voice echoing softly in the cavernous space. She addressed the leader. You've fallen far. Kidnapping accountants now. Your brother would be ashamed. The man, Matteo, stiffened. My brother is dead because of you. Your brother was a fool who tried to skim from a shipment marked for the Russians. I merely provided the ledger. His choices were his own. She took a few steps forward, her hands relaxed at her sides. Let her go. This conversation is between us. It is now, Matteo countered. He gestured, and one of his men yanked me back, an arm locking around my throat. The pressure was immediate, restricting my air. I choked, my hands flying up to claw at the sinewy forearm. Luciana didn't flinch. But something in the air tightened, like the moment before a lightning strike. You are making a mistake. The mistake was thinking you were untouchable, that your heart was made of stone. Matteo spat. But we found a crack. He nodded to his man, and the arm tightened. Spots danced before my eyes. Stop. The word was quiet, yet it seemed to freeze the very dust in the air. Luciana's emptiness was gone, replaced by a focus so absolute it was terrifying. You want the territory on the West Docks. It's yours. Matteo looked surprised, then triumphant. Just like that? For this one. For her immediate release, unharmed, yes. Her eyes were on mine now, holding my fading gaze. A promise. An apology. And you walk away? No retaliation. Matteo pressed, greed warring with suspicion. A faint, cold smile touched her lips. I said the territory is yours. I did not say the Russians would be informed of the new management, or that the city permits would vanish. A kingdom of rotten pilings and police raids is all yours, Matteo. His triumph curdled into rage. You think you're so clever. You're in no position to dictate terms. He drew a pistol, leveling it not at her, but at me. Kneel. Now. Or I paint the floor with her. Time stopped. The barrel was a black eye staring at my soul. I saw Luciana's composure shatter. Not into panic, but into a transformative fury. The woman vanished, and the predator emerged. It was in the coil of her muscles, the glacial deadness in her eyes. You should have shot me first, she said, her voice a whisper that carried like a curse. It happened in a burst of impossible motion. Her hand flashed to the small of her back and came up. A sharp crack split the air, not the loud bang of the movies, but a suppressed, spiteful sound. The man holding me grunted, his grip loosening as he stumbled back. Warm spray misted the side of my face. Not mine. His. I dropped to my knees, gasping. Chaos erupted. Matteo fired, the report deafening in the enclosed space, but Luciana was already moving, a shadow divorced from physics. She fired twice more, precise, economical. Another man fell. Matteo dove behind a steel pillar, shooting wildly. Luciana didn't seek cover. She advanced, a relentless specter. A bullet grazed her jacket, tearing the fabric. She didn't seem to notice. Her world had narrowed to a single point, elimination. Olivia, her voice cut through the noise, calm and commanding. The door. Behind the crate to your left. Go. I couldn't move. I was rooted, watching this dance of death, this woman who was both my secret lover and a harbinger of violent ends. Now. The roar was pure authority, breaking my paralysis. I scrambled on hands and knees towards the rusted crate she'd indicated. Behind it, a smaller, personnel door hung ajar. I looked back. Matteo leapt from his cover, gun raised. Luciana was closer. She didn't shoot. She closed the distance in 2 strides, her hand striking his wrist with a brutal chop. The gun clattered away. He swung at her, a wild, powerful blow. She flowed inside his guard, one arm deflecting, the other driving forward. Not a fist. Her hand, stiff and aimed with surgical precision, struck his throat. He collapsed, gagging, clawing at his neck. The silence that followed was more shocking than the gunfire. It was just the drip-drip of water and Matteo's wet, struggling breaths. Luciana stood over him, a dark angel of judgment. She picked up his discarded pistol, ejected the magazine, and tossed the empty weapon into the shadows. Then she turned to me. The predator was receding, but not gone. Her eyes were still dark pools of fury and residual violence. Her breath came in controlled pulls. She walked toward me, each step measured. She stopped a foot away, her gaze scanning me, checking for injuries. She saw the blood on my face, not my own. A muscle ticked in her jaw. She reached out, her fingers steady as stone, brushing the sticky warmth from my cheek. The tenderness of the gesture amidst the carnage shattered me. A sob broke from my chest. "I told you to go," she whispered, her voice rough. "I couldn't," I choked out. "I couldn't leave you." Something fractured in her eyes. The last of the ice melted, revealing a raw, wounded vulnerability that was more devastating than any display of power. She pulled me to her, not in a kiss, but into a crushing embrace. I buried my face in the collar of her jacket, smelling gunpowder, vetiver, and the iron scent of blood. Her heart hammered against mine, a frantic, living drum. "I'm sorry," she breathed into my hair, the words ragged. "I am so sorry. This is my world. This is what I tried to keep from you." I clung to her, my anchor in a sea of horror. "You came alone. I couldn't risk a war coming in here. I needed precision." Her arms tightened. "I will burn empires to the ground for you. Do you understand that now? That is the monster you've chosen." I pulled back just enough to look at her face, streaked with grime and shadows. "You're not a monster. You're my gangster lover." The term, silly and profound, hung in the bloody air. A breath that was almost a laugh, almost a sob, escaped her. She rested her forehead against mine. "Foolish, prudent Olivia. What am I going to do with you?" "Take me home," I said. "Wherever that is." She nodded, a simple, profound acceptance. She kept one arm around me, turning to survey her work with a cold, dismissive glance. The professional part of her was already planning the cleanup, the messages to send, the balance of power to recalibrate. But the hand that held me, though strong, was gentle. She led me out of the warehouse of death, into the cool, indifferent night. She didn't take me to my apartment. She took me to the penthouse, the fortress with the view that owned the city. Inside, under the silent, gleaming lights, the final walls crumbled. She tended to me with a quiet ferocity, washing the blood from my skin, wrapping me in a soft robe. The sensuality was there, but it was different now. It was in the trembling of her hands as she touched my unmarked skin, in the desperate way her lips found my forehead, my eyelids, my palms. It was a reverence born of near loss, a claiming sealed in fire and blood. Later, in the darkness of her bed, with the city's electric dreams glittering below, she held me as if I were made of fractured glass. The full story spilled from her in hushed, broken pieces, the weight of her father's legacy, the loneliness of the throne, the constant, calculating watchfulness that had kept her alive and utterly isolated. "I thought pushing you away was strength," she confessed, her voice a vibration against my skin. "It was just another kind of cowardice. I was afraid that letting you in would make me weak. Instead, you saw me, the real me, and you walked toward me, not away." "You terrify me," I whispered honestly, tracing the line of her jaw. "And I have never wanted anything more." She turned her head, catching my fingers, pressing a kiss to my palm. "Then stay and be my light. I will build a fortress around you so strong that not even a shadow can touch you. But you must understand, you will live within its walls. Our world will be this view, these rooms, the places I can make safe." I thought of my old life, the spreadsheets, the predictable quiet. It felt like a story about someone else. Here was danger, darkness, and a love that felt like a fundamental truth. Here was a woman who would walk into hell alone to bring me back. "I'm not afraid of the walls," I said, moving to kiss her. "As long as you're inside them with me." Her kiss was a vow, a surrender, a beginning. It tasted of salt and salvation. Outside, the dangerous world turned, but here, in the heart of the fortress, we were not a mogul and an accountant, nor a gangster and her lover. We were Luciana and Olivia, two souls who had found each other in the crossfire, choosing to love in the dark, knowing the price and deciding, together, that it was worth everything. The violence in the warehouse was a door swinging shut on my old life, But the room we entered was still being built, its dimensions unknown, its shadows deep. The morning after was not soft. Sunlight cut across the pent floor in sharp, accusatory angles. I woke alone in the vast bed, the sheets cool where she had been. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought I had dreamed the blood, the gunshots, the embrace. Then I saw the jacket, draped over a chair, the torn fabric and dark stain a brutal proof. I found her on the terrace, a silhouette against the glittering skyline. She held a phone to her ear, her voice too low to hear, her posture radiating a tension that made the air feel thin. As I approached, sliding the glass door open, I caught the tail end. Ensure the message is absolute. The Russians get their share from the West Docks, with my compliments. Mateo's associates are to be offered a choice, quiet retirement or a permanent one. She listened, her jaw tight. Do it clean. She ended the call and didn't turn, but her shoulders lowered a fraction, sensing my presence. You're handling it, I said, not a question. It must be handled. The aftermath is often more important than the event. If the balance is not restored, the vacuum will swallow others. Finally, she turned. In the daylight, she looked exhausted, her eyes holding a century of weariness. You should not hear this. I'm already in it, I replied, wrapping my arms around myself against the morning chill. Ignorance won't protect me now. It will just make me blind. She studied me, a long, penetrating look. What do you want, Olivia? Truly. A windowed office? A safer city block? A different life, far from here? Name it. It is yours. The offer was immense, terrifying in its scope. She was trying to give me an exit, a rewrite. I stepped closer until I could see the faint, almost invisible scar by her eyebrow, the tiny flecks of amber in her dark irises. I want the truth. All of it. Not the curated version. I want to understand the machine I've chosen to live inside. I don't want to be a protected painting on your wall. I searched for the word. Your compass. Even if you already know north. A storm of emotion crossed her face, fear, pride, a devastating hope. A compass can point to a treacherous direction. Then we'll navigate it together. That was our new pact. It did not mean a sudden immersion into brutality. Luciana was a strategist, and my education was deliberate, gradual. She started with the legitimate empire, the shipping conglomerates, the hospitality groups, the tech investments. I sat in her study as she explained the intricate web, how the clean and the soiled were woven together, one funding the other, one laundering the other's reputation. It was a master class in duality. I began to work again, not as a junior auditor, but from the penthouse. With my skills, I started to see the patterns she spoke of, the subtle transfers, the shell companies that existed only to breathe clean air into dirty money. I pointed out inefficiencies, risks she had missed. I was not auditing for a corporate boss. I was auditing a kingdom, and my queen listened, her respect a quiet, glowing thing between us. The sensuality of our relationship transformed, deepened. It was no longer just a release of tension or a discovery of intimacy. It became a dialogue. A touch after a difficult phone call was a sentence. A kiss before she left for a meeting that carried the scent of danger was a paragraph. The nights were our sanctuary, where the crown was set aside. There, she was just Luciana, a woman who loved the works of obscure poets, who played jazz piano with a clumsy, self-taught passion late at night, who secretly adored terrible reality television. I learned the maps of her body, every scar a story I now understood in context. The pale line on her ribs was from a knife fight over a territory dispute a decade ago. The nick on her shoulder was from a shattered windshield during an attempted ambush. But the world did not stop its turning. One evening, an envelope was delivered by a stone-faced courier. No stamp, no address. Inside was a single photograph of my mother leaving her garden club meeting in Larchmont. On the back, a handwritten note, a reminder of how connected we all are. Ice flooded my veins. This was different from a direct attack on me. This was subtler, more insidious. Luciana took the photograph, her face hardening into something lethal. She didn't rage. She grew very, very still. This is from the Sullivans. They operate upstate. They think this is a clever nudge. She looked at me. This is the game. They won't touch her. It would invite a war they cannot win. This is a probe to see if my affection has made me unstable. What do we do? I asked, though we firm and unflinching. We respond in kind. Her smile was sharp. But we will be more creative. 2 days later, a beautifully arranged basket of exotic, poisonous orchids was delivered to the wife of Patrick Sullivan at her charity luncheon, with a card that read, "Some beauties are best admired from a distance. We are all connected." Attached was a flawless photo of their son at his exclusive preschool. The message was received. The subtle threats ceased. I had witnessed and indirectly participated in my first act of cold, psychological warfare. I felt queasy, but also a strange, grim satisfaction. We had protected what was mine. This was our life. A negotiation between light and shadow every day. I insisted on maintaining a sliver of my old world. I visited my mother with a discreet car and a driver who was far more than a driver. I met friends for coffee under a gentle, unseen surveillance I had come to accept as the price of admission. The true test came months later. A deal involving a casino license in New Jersey was turning sour. A city councilman, deep in Luciana's pocket, had gotten greedy. He was threatening to expose certain financial arrangements unless his share was doubled. "I'll handle it," Luciana said, her voice promising dark things. "Let me talk to him," I heard myself say. She stared at me. "Absolutely not. You handle with a hammer. Sometimes you need a scalpel. He's a greedy man, not a fearless one. Let me see if I can apply pressure of a different kind." It was a gamble. My confidence, born of months of immersion, faced off against her instinct to protect. Finally, she nodded, her eyes wary. "You will be monitored every second." I met the councilman in a neutral, public place, a busy restaurant. I was not Olivia Tenney victim. I was Olivia, Luciana Veto's counterpart. I spoke to him not of violence, but of consequence. I laid out, in precise, accountant's detail, how his own financial records, which we had of course, could be interpreted in a far more damning light than any testimony he could give about us. I spoke of his family, his legacy, his future not in a jail cell, but in irredeemable ruin. "Miss Veto prefers to reward loyalty, not punish greed," I said, my voice calm over my clamoring heart. "But her patience has a limit. I am that limit. The original arrangement stands. Do we understand each other?" He looked at me, seeing not a weak link, but a new, unexpected front in Luciana's armor. The defiance in his eyes died. He agreed. When I returned to the penthouse, Luciana was waiting, her anxiety palpable. I gave a slight nod. She pulled me into a kiss that was pure, unadulterated relief and fierce pride. "My ruthless accountant," she murmured against my lips. "Your partner," I corrected. That word, partner, settled between us, finding its home. I was not a hostage to her world, nor its oblivious queen. I was its steward, its moral counterweight, its willing accomplice in the parts that could be justified, and its conscience in the parts that could not. We argued sometimes fiercely. I drew lines she wanted to cross. She saw necessities I wanted to ignore. We were the negotiation itself, a constant, living treaty between love and power. 1 year to the day after the coffee stain, we stood again on her terrace. The city lay at our feet, a kingdom of countless lights and endless shadows. "It's not the life I imagined for you," she said, her hand finding mine, their fingers interlacing, a perfect fit. I looked at our joined hands, then at the horizon. "It's not a life I imagined at all, but it's ours, and I wouldn't trade a second of it." I turned to her. "Even the scary parts. Especially the scary parts. They're real." She leaned in, her kiss a promise for all the tomorrows to come, a mixture of dark and light, danger and devotion, a testament to a love that did not flinch from the truth of itself. The story was not a fairy tale with an ending. It was a syndicate, a merger of two souls, and our ledger, complex and forever evolving, was just beginning.